Deacon Pam and Conti for helping to lead this study. It's been, come on, Conti, you've been a wonderful blessing.
I don't have the book anymore. I gave it to my son. He's leading a series out in California.
Okay.
He's the head of the committee.
That's right. He's Episcopalian now. Yeah. And he's leading the search committee for a new priest.
But he's also leading.
He's also adult ed.
Group that discusses things.
Oh, okay. It's very nice to meet him. All right, chapter 11. By the way, Deacon Pam will be the official end of this book study and worship on Maundy Thursday. We thought on the night when Jesus gives us a new commandment to love one another as he has loved us, that would be a wonderful way to end this series. And our deacon is going to preach on Sunday.
Monday, Thursday.
On Maundy Thursday, yeah. That's what I mean. Just, you know, there's truth and there's literal truth. You have to interpret. What I said was true. It is not literally true. All right.
I don't know how it's true.
Alternate fact.
Oh.
It's an alternate fact.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
And the question this week is, does love mean avoiding politics?
I didn't say anything.
Ah. Well, and what's the answer?
Yes, no, and sometimes.
Okay.
Let's get that on.
Let's get on tape. Natalie Van Wanning's mother.
Yes, no, and sometimes.
All righty. So do you want to say more? No? Just leave us with that.
One statement that I took out of the first chapter, or the chapter 11, was politics can be the art of improving ourselves. And I thought long and hard about that and was trying to figure out what they're talking about. And I'm still not sure I know, but maybe it's because of how we approach politics. It can be approached in many ways. And you have to look at the big picture and see how you fit into that picture. And those of us in the church, I think, don't do a very good job about that. And I think we could improve ourselves. And that's basically it.
I thought in 227 it talked a couple different things. It says, as leaders, if we want to engage the issues, we have to do it in a way that honors all the many viewpoints represented. And sometimes that's a hard thing, maybe for me to do. But if you need more convincing, consider this. If all the decent people sit this one out, we're handing our country and our future to the extremists. And it's easy to sit out. It's easy to sit out.
Yeah, it is. I've sat out being addicted to my newsfeed. I want to say, well, I just find it. I don't sit out of the news, but I've discovered, since somewhere around November of 2016, that I just don't want to watch the news all the time. I can get a clue of what's going on without that. But Connie, you want to say something?
Facebook. My Southern Baptist relatives posts on Facebook are very hard to ignore, but rather than get angry or try to get an interaction going in that forum, I just avoid them. If I could see them in person, then I could look for common ground.
Isn't that true? Isn't that
common
true?
values and principles, because I'm sure they're there. I know they are, but
I think about my my roots in very red Sioux County, Iowa, and these were. I was raised well, raised in faith and love, and I would love to have conversations, but digitally, even on staff, if we have a question we need to hash out after this, like an unwritten rule, after 2 texts, stop. We're going to do this in person, because it's just you're missing so many cues digitally, right? Yeah. Conti, I was thinking with the politics, we're all concerned about climate change and Kathy and I are trying to make some changes that we can. But the reality is, the only way we can deal with this is if we deal with it politically. That's, Kathy and I are just spitting in the wind. There need to be politicians coming together worldwide to make some decisions that improve things for us. And that when politics is functioning and seeking the common good, it is the answer. Without political solutions, this is not winnable. Now, will there be, in my opinion,
Why do you think that's happening? Why are politicians not coming together?
sin, pride and prejudice. This should be a book.
My favorite.
Is that, I've never read it.
Pride and Prejudice, my favorite book.
I have on my shelf and I never finished. I bought it in seminary, the Brothers Karamazov, and I decided I need to finish that book.
I know, they quoted them.
He did. I was reminded I need to read that book.
Well, no, I think people don't remember.
We're gonna wait for the microphone.
People don't remember. When you get to be my age, you've lived through all this, and you remember back into the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and you were a neighbor to your neighbor. And I think that doesn't happen so much anymore. I think we're afraid of our neighbors now. We don't go out and embrace our neighbors the way we should. And I think that you need to do it on a personal level. You can't just wait for the government to do it.
Now, you were alive and adult in the McCarthy era. What was that like compared to this?
It was a mess. I mean, it was, I was no politician at that point, but everybody hated everybody else. It was terrible.
And we seemed to have pulled out of that. We did at the time, did we not, or did we?
Did we pull out? Do we all love our neighbors anymore?
Well, that's a high bar. But McCarthy was widely discredited for his alternative facts. Was he discredited in his own party? I think so.
I think probably.
Yeah.
Until he stepped over, you went, just a little bit too far, I think, but speaking about, commenting on what you mentioned there about, we used to be able to, meet our neighbors and greet our neighbors and love our neighbors and feel like neighbors. And now we can't even find those feelings anymore. And you said, we live in fear. The politicians have used fear as a divisive tool to maintain power. And when they do that, fear is so powerful. It's a huge motivator. So is love. But they're not using love and the greater good. They're using fear.
Well, a good example of that is COVID.
We're going to wait for the microphone again.
I think a good example of that is COVID. We don't believe the people who are in charge, the people who supposedly know what's happening. But many of us do not believe them. And therefore, you can't set a program in motion to take care of it. And that's pretty obvious right now when part of COVID is coming back again. Yeah. And I don't understand it at all.
I think that our leaders are split. If we all looked up at our leaders and saw that they were unified in all of them trying to help us, but they're not unified. They're split. And so then that causes us to feel less confident in their leadership. If they're not together, we can't be together. Yeah.
There was a thing Luther wrote during the plague. It is, I can't remember the name of it, but Google Luther and the plague and Christians. And it's staggering how contemporary it is. That people were saying, now we're free to do whatever we please. And it's like it was written now. And Luther made the point, which was kind of our mantra, is you're free to love your neighbor and do whatever you will. He said, but or he really takes aim at those who say, well, we will pray and that will see us through this plague. he says, I pray for this. And when I'm done praying, I disinfect, and then I go to my neighbor and I do this and I that. Of course we pray, but it's staggeringly good reading. And yeah,
Ecclesiastes.
Hmm?
Ecclesiastes,
because,
there's nothing new under the
oh,
sun.
gotcha.
We keep doing it over and over again.
Yeah, remember your history or you're doomed to repeat it, but I think we're doomed to repeat it, even if we remember. Vanity, vanity is my favorite from Ecclesiastes. Yeah. Well, that was almost clay-like in its jauntiness there. That was good. Jaunty is good.
I know it is. I'm glad I gave it to you.
Okay.
I just think.
So trying to find the common ground, he mentions, which is, yeah, it is terribly hard digitally, and we do so much communicating that way. So much of it is so good. I mean, the number of FaceTimes my mother-in-law had with her grandkids in Florida, I mean, wow. The wonderful time. But it's got its limits. The idea of let's, and I actually had thought of that, but not in quite as succinctly as he put it. When you let's go wherever we need to go to find something we hold in common. Right? And I mean, like even Christians, well, that's actually kind of true these days, unfortunately, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do we hold in common with our Southern Baptist friends, or our Reformed Church friends in Sioux County? There are things. I mean, I was raised to love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. I was raised that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Yeah, what do we have in common? Let's go from there. Bill Enke would like to speak, please. And he's waiting for the mic.
Unfortunately, the rules have been changed. And I hate to be a defeatist and disagree with Larry, but with politics, how do you find common ground when there are alternative facts? I used to talk to my brothers before we agreed not to talk about politics, and there was absolutely nothing under the political sun that we could agree on the facts. So if you can't agree on the facts, how do you ever find a common ground?
Yeah, that's kind of ground zero.
There's an article in one of the news feeds on the internet that said that they did an experiment. And I'm not sure who did it, but they paid people so much an hour for listening to CNN for I don't know, a period of a couple of weeks. People who always listen to Fox News. And it turns out that they changed their opinions. To a person, they changed their opinions after listening to CNN for a couple of weeks instead of Fox News. And so some even made the comment, gee, it's interesting that I got some facts to form my opinion now, which I didn't get from Fox News.
Did they do it reverse?
Yeah. Yeah, did they do the other way around?
Did the ones who went through this experiment, did they continue to watch CNN?
CNN is on my news feed. I actually don't count it as my most trusted source. I count it as decent, but I need to have something. Well, I've said before, NPR and me get along really well.
And Walter Cronkite.
Bill, he died. I'm sorry.
And it's our loss.
I know that.
I really think my grandpa Dykstra, who was something of a prophet, and prophets are not honored. He couldn't get a job because he was a pacifist during World War I and World War II. This was not politically popular. He wrote about TV and said, "This is not good," and was talking about how this would change the world in ways that he felt were not well, and it's really quite prophetic. I feel that something happened. This is in both sports and the news. When you have 24-hour news channels and 24-hour sports channels, you've got to think of things to say, and what attracts are opinions that are outraged, are controversial, right? And I think that's not been good. I also remember in 1980s, I was in Dubuque, Iowa, and my parishioners were listening to someone named Rush Limbaugh. They said I should listen to him too. So I did. I thought he was entertaining. I thought, you know what though? People are going to believe him. I always wanted to sit down with him, and there was never, every caller who called to disagree, I don't say every very often, was ridiculed for disagreement. If you had any concern about women's rights, you were a feminazi. If you had any concern about the environment, you were a tree hugger. And I wanted to say I was raised to care for the environment, right? And I don't think that every single thing environmentalists say should be guiding our public policy, but can we agree that this world needs to be cared for the way our Creator says we should? Well, not on Rush Limbaugh's show, you couldn't. And that's become the entertaining thing as well. I also used to listen to Jon Stewart, who I think is a sharp thinker, but it was the anti-Rush Limbaugh, and I found that when all I listened to was Jon Stewart. By the way, I got so old I couldn't stay up late. That's how that ended. But then I'd be angry at the other direction because you had to attract an audience, and so some of that we've got to have a pull, and anger and fear are magnets. And then if you lead from there, they're horrible leaders. Horrible leaders.
One of the things that our churches do not do is tell us how to vote, this type of thing. And I'm not saying that they should be telling us how to vote, but I think that's part of the problem. And the other side do tell our people what to do and how to vote. And if you want to be a good member of that church, you're going to do it this way. I don't know what the answer is to that. We try to think that people are smart enough to figure it out for themselves. And we preach love and caring, but apparently that isn't enough. It doesn't translate. And how do you translate that into actually doing something for your neighbor, or caring for the world, or caring for nature? I don't think we say enough about that.
Some churches have issues about abortion, and they tell their parishioners what to do about abortion. So is that you got to find that happy balance, and there are all kinds of issues out there.
Another quote from the brothers, what are they? Yes, another quote from them, which I'm not going to quote because I'm not much good at remembering things, but what they said is that you are going to be tempted. It is really, really tempted to drop humble love and pick up violence. But you will find your life so much richer if you continue with humble love and put aside and don't let violence into your life. And so I think that kind of thing is true about telling congregations what they're supposed to do. Talk about things with humble love them, but when you start telling people what to do, then it starts being a kind of violence into their thoughts and their beliefs and stuff. And so it's the whole, I judge you because you believe such and such. And who are we to judge? We aren't. God's the judge. That's not in my sermon Thursday, so don't worry.
Mean Sunday?
It could be Sunday. It could be a very special Sunday. Happens in the middle of the week.
Now, I'm not doing this to stop the conversation, but I'm going to the last page in the book because I liked it so much.
The last page.
It said, when God, who is love, becomes our spiritual center of gravity and love our moral compass, we live differently, regardless of what the world around us does. The world changes for the better, one life at a time. One life at a time. No, I mean, do we, you know, anyway, I just really like that paragraph.
You will hear that on Thursday.
And that's what I did, and my brothers did it too. We decided that our love for one another was more important. So we just agreed about 2 years ago to not talk about politics because our love was so important. But not all families have been able to come to that understanding.
But the important thing is you found something to agree on.
Yeah, love.
Right.
That goes with, on page 235, bottom of 235, there's practical steps to salute towards solutions. He says it's not rocket science, and it is true that there are some matters on which we simply won't agree. But you don't build on the negative. You build on the positive and on what can be done. And we can stand as protectors, not protesters. I don't know how you can go out in nature and not feel like you want to protect it. That's the way I was raised, is to protect the creation. And I don't understand any other way of looking at the creation. So that's my problem.
And you need to find someone who doesn't and find the common ground. That's what he's saying. And it is certainly, you know, it's easy to say it.
To find the common ground, it's a matter of you start at a point where you're in disagreement and you try to step back and get towards the beginning. So when you think about gun violence, you know, I would come in and say, we need to have stricter gun laws. Somebody else who's on the other side doesn't feel that, but okay, let's step back. Can we agree that we don't like seeing children in schools dying due to guns? Yep, we probably can agree there. Okay, so let's stop there and let's just be in that moment together and have that common ground.
It boils down to knowing your own values. I mean, a lot of people don't know what their values are because they watch this show, they watch that show, they hear this feed, they see. So I think that's the crux of it. Know who you are and what you value. And hopefully with the grace of God, it's a positive values, positive forces, and help build in a community, whether it's your neighborhood, literally your neighborhood, your church, your committees.
Now, if that isn't a good segue to the next chapter, I don't know what is.
Okay. You want to say more about that? No, Chris, do you want to say more about that?
Well, he talks about in the next chapter, hope, help, and healing, that not to give up on love, I guess it's actually in the appendix where he talks about writing down your values, living your values, and coming up with a plan based on those values of how you're going to approach life and moving forward and being a neighbor and loving.
I don't think you always have to write it down. I don't think you always have to write it down, but I think you need to think before you attack someone. I don't
gives a whole list there. You know, listen more to others, schedule time for reading and reflection, commit time for growth, for reading, commit regular time to prayer and reflection, saying, I love you, giving back, can't read my own writing, giving back money and resources, and find like-minded people to be with. Don't walk alone.
If we ever do decide to be one of the people who visits our companion congregation in Same, Tanzania, you will fly in past Mount Kilimanjaro.
But he talked about mountaintops as being places where people are touched and moved. And I agree with that. I've been to a few mountains and I agree. But I think oceans, or a flatlander like me, do the same thing for me. I stand on an ocean beach and I'm amazed and astounded at the largeness of it and how small I am in comparison to it, and how it's, and then of course I go down this rat hole of, I know it's being destroyed and blah, 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 and what can I do about it? So
I agree. I love the ocean. And the nice thing is that I can breathe there, because on top of mountains, I can't breathe very well. So, yeah.
I'm with you.
Bishop Curry actually made the same comment about visiting North Dakota, if you recall. The expansiveness, as opposed to the confines of the city, he found to just remind him in a holy way how small he is. And that becomes humbling in the best way.
And then as we all are planning vacations, the biggest draw now, again, are our national parks. People want to be in that nature. So it's there. It's really there. And again, how do we get everyone on board towards the same goal?
Clay has the answer.
I was just thinking, I never feel smaller than when you get to a dark area at night and look up at the Milky Way. I mean, then I think the Earth is a really small place, and there should be a way to solve problems because we're so small in the universe here. And then my mind can't even imagine infinity and galaxies beyond, and then it kind of shuts down and you just enjoy looking at the stars.
That's called being present in the moment.
By the way, I've never seen stars like I saw. We took a youth group to Rocky Mountain National Park and we were hiking up there at a base camp. And after about 5 days, the tent was getting pretty ripe. I was with a bunch of adolescent boys, so we were sleeping outside. Wow. There was no light for miles. I've never seen stars like that. It was like you were in them. It was so close and bright.
And most of us live in towns or cities. Most of us live in towns and cities, and there's lights all the time.
Right.
And we don't observe the heavens at night, rarely. I'd say most of the people in our country don't. Many have never been out of cities compared to ancient times when there was no light, there were no lights or electricity, and people were totally tied to the rhythms of nature, and now we aren't so much.
There's always light and there's always noise. We live a mile from the interstate. It's amazing how noisy it is.
Light pollution
Noise pollution.
and noise pollution.
Moved to Dallas, Iowa, and my wife and I were down to 600, and my wife and I were sitting on the back patio of the parsonage on one of our first nights there, and she said, "Do you hear that?" It's quiet. And Luther Seminary is within a mile of a relatively busy highway, and so it's always. And the silence was so silent it was loud in a very good way. You probably experienced that at your place.
Except when they're having races at the fairgrounds. But actually, what I hear are coyotes and owls and all kinds of wonderful wildlife. It's not real quiet out there.
It's a different noise though, right?
It's a wonderful noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I-80's constant.
Yeah, boom, boom, yeah, definitely.
We had some people visit us from San Bernardino, California.
When I worked at campus ministry.
Campus ministry and everything. And their experience of looking up was totally different than they had ever seen before. Because they lived in California, Los Angeles area and everything, and they'd never seen stars before. And they were terrified of the coyotes too.
One guy wouldn't get out of the van.
Yeah, he'd stand there at the edge of the firelight and with a big stick.
Bears out there.
Well, yeah, but not out in West Liberty.
No,
And he was visiting us.
no, I know, but I mean.
They also have drive-by shootings too,
It's all relative.
Well, we went to visit them and we were a little worried about the drive-by shootings, so.
One of my favorite places is Prairie Woods up in Hiawatha. And it's an interesting place because it's really close to the interstate. So you hear the interstate, but every so often you hear the train. And the train is very close there. And it's amazing how I can kind of block that out or say, oh, that's the sound. And then I will block it out and be where I am. And it's a neat place.
Add it to my list. No.
A thought on that. That's what we're doing. We create the white noises in our life. You know, just like eventually you don't hear the interstate anymore. Eventually you don't hear your furnace going on anymore. You're moving into a new place. All those new noises become the white noise. And in society, that's what we're doing. We've created white noises. We don't hear the pleas and the cries and the needs or don't understand it. So we create this bubble that I live in, this safety net in my community. And well, it's not affecting me. You know, climate change isn't affecting me. It is Africa, but that's over there. You know what I mean? So it's that, well, it's or derecho or whatever. Yes. And so that's the white noise, I think we just kind of create.
Very nice observation. Trying to limit my screen time a little bit, actually quite a bit. The screen becomes its own kind of white noise. But the story of the man who was standing in line to greet him was marvelous, wasn't it? Been raised by people who were Christians, they said, but were leaders in the Ku Klux Klan, wandered into an Episcopal church. Finally, he got to know them well enough to tell them his story, and they loved him anyway.
And that story of hearing the new person is kind of like the white noise story a moment ago. You know, we don't hear those that are reaching out because we tend to be locked into what we're doing. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Not hearing people out there.
Hello, Ms. Blakes. Are you our crucifer today? Thank you, Roy.
She said, so much for sneaking in, Roger. We're talking about love, so it's okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
We love Roger anyway.
Yep. Miriam said yes, she'd carry the cross.
Maybe you're our white place.
There you go.
Okay. Chris, what's coming up in forum after Easter?
Oh, no, you're gonna ask me to remember stuff. Let's see here. We've got some good stuff coming up.
I know in May, maybe you could run over to Steve, and
has-
Steve can tell you about the first.
Steve has his hand up.
Or 8th. No, first.
So on May 1, we have a great speaker. I've known him for, I don't know, 20 some years. He recruited me to Iowa. His name is Gerard Clancy, he goes by Jerry Clancy. Unfortunately, after he recruited me here, 3 months later, he left. So, but he's back at Iowa now. He's an associate dean in the College of Medicine for external affairs. He's a psychiatrist. He's a native of Iowa City. And he's going to speak on mental health and the pandemic or COVID. And he's given this talk other places. But he will be an entertaining speaker. So I really encourage all of you to come and hear what Jerry has to say. And that's on May 1st.
On May 8th, we'll be learning more about Compassion International. Dan and Nova are going to be leading that. Compassion is a worldwide organization through which they partner with churches throughout the world, and you can sponsor children, which Kathy and I have done. Currently, it costs $38 a month to do that. One of the things that we will be talking about is the fact that a compassion site is in Same, Tanzania, the cathedral parish. And so while you are welcome to consider sponsoring anyone, and they'll have pictures of children from around the world, but you also have the option of sponsoring a child in that parish. And, I invite you to consider it.
On April 24th is Pastor Sarah, and she'll talk to us about what's going on in LCM. And then, as Steve mentioned, May 1st is Jerry Clancy. May 8th is Compassion International. May 15th is a council listening post. And then May 22nd is our last Sunday of Adult Forum, and it will be World Hunger with Paul Ostrom.
Wonderful.
And of course, there will not be a forum on Easter Sunday.
No.
There will be breakfast, so come for breakfast.
And if you'd like to help with that breakfast, there's a sign-up sheet upstairs. And then on June 5, there will be a program.
There will be a program.
There will be.
And a potluck.
And a potluck and a party. And I've heard them say, well, the program is going to take a long time. Oh, good. So, well, there's Cheryl back there chuckling, yeah. So anyway, if you want to sign up for breakfast, is that right, Cheryl? Is that what you have in your hand?
Yeah. Although you can sign up for Tuesday also.
Okay.
All righty. Well, unless someone would, Connie, would you want to have the last word?
My last word would be, this has been very informative and enjoyable. And I think we have all taken something from the discussions that we've been having for the last 6 weeks, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So find another good book and we'll do it again.
I'll ask the bishop. She's the one who recommended this book to us. I asked her if she'd care to join us any time, but her Sundays are pretty booked. So, but she, yeah, I'll ask her again. That's where it came from.
I have felt drenched in love because it has gone all the way through our Lent, not just on Wednesdays, but in sermons and in prayers and everything. And I just really have felt drenched in love. That you'll hear in the sermon. And so the thing that just amazed me then, I get a whole bunch of daily devotions, and they aren't even my Lenten devotions. These are just daily devotions that come as emails, and they were all talking about love all the time. It's just like, whoa, this is, obviously I need to be paying attention to this, because everywhere I'm stepping, someone is talking to me about love. That's where I heard about the quote that I said, that I didn't quite say, but.
Well, I think Bishop Curry would say, anybody who's talking about God truly will talk about love.
Right.
Because God is love. Anybody who's talking about not love is not talking about God, even if they're using God's name. And so you start to hear that more and more, right?
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of that going on too.
Do any good to, if you hear someone speaking about God without any context of love, would it do any good to ask them, ask them why there is no love in what they're saying?
But did you, when he was working there near the state capitol, I mean, he said that the first thing he said to them is, I think we can all agree that the golden rule, which is in many different religions, the golden rule is really, and so are you working on something that helps your neighbor, that is showing love to someone else? And so you can probably say that, but don't be a smart ass about it.
Right. Exactly, right? I mean, this is, if that's a drive-by piece of shrapnel I'm going to shell somebody with, that probably won't go well, right? If there's an actual chance to step back to the conversation where we actually agree that loving your neighbor is a good thing.
Right, then you can discuss how that happens.
Yeah. Oh, I forget where I am. All righty, well.
I'll just say one last thank you to all of you who participated in this 6-week study and who have come to adult forums throughout the pandemic. You've stuck with us, and it's been challenging, but it's been very, I think, rewarding. We've learned about a lot of different topics, and I hope we carry all of those, at least a little crumb of all of those topics with us, and keep learning. And we'll be back in the fall with new things to talk about. And as always, our adult ed committee is very interested in hearing from you. If you have an idea, or you know of someone who would be a fantastic speaker, let us know.
Or if you would love to join in on the planning.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You could be on the committee. All right. All right. Go in peace, serve the Lord. Thank you all.